good evening. Thank y'all very much for coming out tonight. I know the weather's a little tough, but we've got a really good audience tonight. For most of y'all here that may not know me, I'm Mayor Jay Dean, and I want to tell you a little bit about the whole comprehensive plan philosophy, and I'm going to try to do just a real easy analogy. On a lot of our literature, you'll notice we used a compass, and the vision was that in order to have a plan, you have to have a compass. And realistically, it's about a ship. A ship is our community. And the company that owns the ship is the citizens of the community. And where we want that ship to go and what the program is and what we want that ship to accomplish is determined by the company, which is you, the citizens. In order for the ship to properly navigate, you have to have a captain of the ship. In my opinion, the captain of your ship is your city council that the company hires to manage the crew. The crew is the staff of the city, and the objective is to navigate that ship on a course to make sure that the goals that the company has, you the citizens, that happens. There's a lot of planning that goes in place before the ship ever sets sail. So what we're doing for the last almost 18 months now has been working, in various means. We have a great group of volunteer citizens led by Mr. Keith Honey as our chair, who've agreed to participate in an ongoing program to initiate discussion with the citizens through public meetings, just as we're doing tonight, through breakout meetings on various subjects. I want to thank the Longview News Journal for a wonderful job of showing and presenting some of the data that's been discussed. But at the end of the day, this is about you. And the whole goal has always been, from my perspective, from the city council perspective, is we want to make sure that over the next 15 to 20 years, the city is going in the direction you, the citizens, want to see it go. Now, it takes a lot. I mean, obviously, when you put in place a program such as we're talking, it costs, and that has to be considered as the program moves forward. But the objective is to engage our citizens to make sure that what we're putting in place as a comprehensive plan is what you, the owner of the ship, wants to see happen over the next 15 to 20 years. So tonight is another sequence in having a public meeting. You're going to see some presentations tonight. We're going to have some breakouts to look at some of the data that's been collected so far. But the number one objective, and I ask you humbly as your mayor, is to give us your feedback. It's not okay to leave and then complain about something later. This is your opportunity to say, hey, we agree, hey, we disagree. But let's get that information, and we're going to show you a lot of easy ways to do that. But let's get your input. This is your ship, this is your city, and we want you, having the controls of where it's going. So again, I appreciate y'all being here tonight. Hope you get a good bit of information tonight. And for God's sakes, any questions you have as we're going through the process, please make sure to get those answered. This time I'd like to invite Keith Honey up. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to thank Jay for his vision in initiating this process and getting us started at beginning to take a look at what the future of our city can be. Without his leadership, none of us would probably be here today. And I hope we all agree that this is a good thing, to finally take control of what it is we want to be as a community and where we want to go. So, Jay, thank you for your leadership and for that of the City Council. Let's give him a hand. Thank you. Well, let me add my thanks for being here and attending tonight. I know the weather is kind of rough out there, and I appreciate you all being here. I think you're going to be pleased with a lot of what you see in this plan, and it comprises a lot of work by a lot of people, including probably maybe all of you in this room who've participated in the surveys, who've been a part of the discussion as we go forward, and I'm so thankful that you will be here to be a part of the continuing discussion. Let me introduce just a few people, and we owe some thanks to some specific people for the work that they've done and continue to do on this. If the CPAC committee, that's the Comprehensive Plan Advisory Committee, would just stand quickly so people can see who you are, I would appreciate that. If you all would please rise. There's probably about 15 or 20 of them here. You're going to hear from Councilman Richard Manley in a minute, but Councilman Manley has served as the council liaison to our committee, and I would like to thank Richard for his work on this project. He's in the back there, and you're going to hear from him in just a minute. Thanks, Richard. The city staff has been absolutely fantastic in working with the committee and with, I hope, all of you in this process. We would not be at all anywhere close to where we are without them. And so I'd really like, and there's a lot of city staff here to help tonight, I'd really like to thank them as well. And then Jay thanked the Longview News Journal for their excellent coverage of what's happened so far, and I wanted to thank them as well. One thing that I think is very important to keep in mind is this is a draft document, so it's not the final product by any means yet. It's gone through some cleansing, it's gone through obviously some review. It's a summary of what the public input up to this point we've gotten, a summary of some massaging of that by the staff and by the committee, but it is still in draft form, and you will have until December 15th to give us your comments about what you see tonight and about what you can read on the website, which is the entire draft plan, and Wendy with Friesen Nichols will tell you how to do that in a moment. The other thing I'd ask you to keep in mind is that this is a very long-term plan, 15 to 20 years. So for us to sit here today and say this specifically is going to happen or that specifically is going to happen, that's simply not the case. What will happen is over the shorter term, which in this case isn't that short, but over the shorter term, there will probably be some priorities identified. Those priorities will be hopefully the things that we can act upon fairly quickly to get the plan underway. But there will be many things that will be longer term, much longer term, and some things which probably may never happen in here that we say we'd like to do. But that's all subject for conversation, discussion, review, and study going forward for the next 15 years, okay? This does set a roadmap for our future, and I like to think of it as a roadmap because when you take off on a trip, any of us, we have our plans, we know where we're kind of headed, but we may not know exactly how we're going to get there. And so there's going to be some stops along the way to get some food, get some gas, and yes, we're going to have to stop by the ATM, right? We're going to have to stop by the ATM on this one too. That's just the nature of the beast as we move forward and as the community grows. I also like to think of it as kind of the old adage is, how do you eat an elephant? Well, you eat it one bite at a time. And that's kind of what we're about here. This is a massive undertaking, a lot of potential options and projects and ideas in this. And to get it accomplished, we're just going to have to start into it and eat it one bite at a time. But that's how you get things accomplished. So please bear with us on that. Let me just give you a real quick overview of what we're going to do tonight. You've heard some of this. Richard Manley is going to come forward in a minute, and he's going to talk about the value and the results of some other communities who've done long-term plans and what the accomplishments have been. Then Wendy Chabet who's our Freese and Nichols consultant, who the city has employed to help us with this plan, will come forward and walk you through the draft document that's been completed. You'll have an opportunity following that presentation. You've got some clickers, some of you have clickers as you came in, to weigh in on a series of about a dozen questions about the plan and the presentation and where we're kind of headed with this. So you'll get an opportunity right there to give us some feedback. If you didn't get a clicker, and probably many of you didn't, I'm guessing, or some of you, we'll do a 2 shift, so you'll have an opportunity to get a clicker and come back in and do the questions again. One thing to keep in mind, this is not a town hall style format meeting, so we don't have any microphones out there for you to come, stand at a microphone and give us your thoughts in this format. But what we do have is, following the presentation, everyone will retire, if they'd like to, back to the Robbins room, which is at the very back of the room. And there will be a series of stations back there that cover each one of the topics in the plan. And there will be people there that worked on the plan, as well as staff from Freese and Nichols and the city, to discuss any questions or issues you may have at this point back in that room. So you can stay as long as you'd like, ask as many questions as you'd like, give us your comments back in the Robbins room on each topic. And remember, you have till December 15th to give us your input online, or there are copies of the plan at the library if you'd like to go there and see it at the library. So with that, we're about to kick off, so let's get started, Wendy.
Good evening. I want to also recognize our State Representative David Simpson, who's joined us tonight. David, thank you very much for being here with us. Anybody in here remember Walter Cronkite? All right, those of us with a little gray in our hair remember. For you young folks, Walter Cronkite, back in 1969, when there was only 3 stations to watch on our black and white television, opined that Chattanooga, Tennessee was the dirtiest city in the United States on national TV. A group of about 50 people from that city came together and formed what was called Chattanooga First. And they decided that they wanted to change what Walter Cronkite and the rest of the world thought about Chattanooga. If any of you have been in Chattanooga, I think you would agree it is an absolutely beautiful city. Yes, it has some assets that we don't have. We have some assets Chattanooga doesn't have. 2 years ago, Kelly Hall, who's the director and president of our Chamber of Commerce, who I think is a very strategic thinker, she'd be with us here tonight if she wasn't off trying to sell Longview in another part of the world, said we need to start going to some of these cities like Chattanooga and find out what they did to go from good to great, to go from bad to good, to go from smelly to pretty. And Chattanooga was the first place we went. The following year, we went to Fort Collins, Colorado. And this past year, or just recently last month, to Greenville, South Carolina, which in my opinion of the 3 cities is probably the one most like Longview. Yes, there are differences and yes, there are similarities, but I like this one probably the best. They described their success much like Chattanooga did in Greenville. They called it their 40-year overnight success. These are truly cities that were transformed from some of the pictures that we may have seen of our own city from back in the 60s and 70s to a city that's walkable, friendly, inviting, and brings people and businesses together into one common location in their downtown. And from that, they expanded out. The one common denominator all 3 cities had was a long-term plan. They had a shared vision for the future. They came together just like all of you are tonight and others who've been involved in this process to develop the vision of what we want our city and what they wanted their city to look like 2 or 3 decades down the road. The people came together, they searched, and they found ways that they agreed and didn't dwell on where they disagreed. Folks, this is our shot at our 20 to 30 year overnight success. Thank you for being here tonight. Let's make it happen. Thank you.
Well, it's quite inspiring words from the mayor and from our chairman and from our council members. So now let's get to the meat of what we're here tonight for. By show of hands, can raise your hand if you know what a comprehensive plan is? Okay, there's a lot of people that we're going to educate tonight because we're really excited about what the city is doing. And I want to tell you a little bit about the comprehensive plan so that everybody knows what it is we're doing and what it's all about. I want to tell you a little bit about just our overview of the process, and Keith touched on this for just a minute. Then tell you some of the things that we heard. We have got a lot of comments over the past year, and so we want to tell you a little bit about what we've heard so far. But most of our time tonight is going to be spent on the recommendations, and then, as he said, we're going to give you the opportunity to tell us if you agree with our recommendations. So you've heard several analogies so far. You've heard it referred to as a ship. You've heard it referred to as a roadmap. I'll give you one more, and this will be our last analogy for the night, I promise. It is, and many times when I'm explaining the comprehensive plan to people, it is like a puzzle. You have so many different components of the city between police and fire and your transportation and your health and wellness and all the different things that make a city go round and round. Imagine trying to put together a puzzle without looking at the box, without having a picture, throwing thousands of pieces and then saying, make something out of this and put this together. That's often what a city is doing when they do not have a comprehensive plan to look at. There's so many strategic decisions that you will make over the next 10 to 20 years, and all the comprehensive plan is it's setting out what that puzzle box looks like so that we have something to go from and something to follow. And what's really important is that our citizens put that together. So a couple of things about the comprehensive plan. It is a long-range plan, like you've already heard. There are many components within it, but these are some of the components that will be in your comprehensive plan that looks at the land use, the transportation, your parks, all those different services that the city provides is what is encompassed within the comprehensive plan. It is the one planning document that pulls everything together in the city. There's a lot of different components, there's a lot of different plans. You'll see references in this document to other documents that you have throughout the city, but this is the one thing that pulls it all together. And most importantly, the comprehensive plan captures the vision of what its citizens want. Going forward, once you adopt this comprehensive plan, then it is what your city will look at when they're making decisions of what capital improvements to make. What do we need to focus our efforts on? What do we need to do going forward? That's what the comprehensive plan is to look at. So again, it is a very important document going forward. Is it going to be the be-all, end-all, be-all? Absolutely not. There are things that will come up tomorrow, next year, 10 years from now, that we didn't even think about, that we had no idea that was going to be coming. And there's certain decisions that your city will make based on those good things that happen. And there's going to be variances to that, but it's an overall guiding document to help us make decisions. So just real quickly, just the overview, in case this is your first meeting, raise your hand if this is the first time that you've been a part of this over the past year. Okay. So it's about probably a quarter of you that haven't been engaged in this. Number one, phase one was getting information. We had some meetings early on. We've had some surveys. A lot of phase one is just getting information. Phase two was in writing the chapters and getting all the analysis and detailed information together for all those different components that you see listed up there. We are right now in phase three, and that is pulling together the report and making the recommendations for implementation. This is the calendar of just what we've been doing. Again, we started back in January. All of those red stars represent committee meetings. There's been a lot of other subcommittee meetings that have happened in between that. We had a large public meeting back in January, and then our process of being completed with this document will be February of this year. February of next year. So our very first meeting, we had tremendous turnout. We had over 400 people at the Belcher Center back in February earlier this year. We had different stations. We had polling devices, much like what you're going to get the opportunity to do tonight. We had several different presentations went on. It was a great input session for us to get a lot of different feedback. We had very enthusiastic participants that wanted to see certain things within their community. We even had young citizens, and this was particularly important for me, and I love seeing kids and young folks. We had it at the Belcher Center on Laterno's campus, and so we had a good number of college students there, and they are our future, so it is very important to hear from them. As I mentioned, we had a visual character survey so that people could give us their ideas of what they wanted to see, what they liked, and what they didn't like. Then we had an online survey, and we had almost 2,500 people fill out that online survey, which I do a lot of cities, or comprehensive plans with a lot of cities, and that was phenomenal turnout. What that tells me, the feedback that we've had so far, and the fact that this room is packed tonight, is that you as citizens care about your city, and that is fantastic. Whether you like what we say tonight or don't like it, the fact that you are here and you're taking time away from your family to be here is awesome. So to every single one of you, I want to say thank you for your participation. This is an age limit. We went out and we went to some of the schools to get their input. So again, a lot of the comments that we got were from students, and that's always intriguing because that is who we're planning for in the next 20 years. So some of the things that we heard in ranking some of our issues, number one issue that we felt like we could do a better job of was quality of life. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means, but in terms of our aesthetics, our appearance, our parks, those things, those intangible things that we have that make Longview interesting, not only to you as citizens, but also to visitors, that was the number one thing that we all said that we needed to work on the most. And you can see how these are ranked in terms of what was important of some of the comments we heard. We also heard other comments about just the recreation, the entertainment, the lack of. A lot of our students and people were saying there's just not a lot to do. We have a lot to be desired in terms of that special place that we want to go, that we all hang out, that we do things. We want more parks. We want more sidewalks. We want the ability to get to other places other than just the car. We want a gateway to the community. We want to bring life and make sure that when people see us on Highway 20 and they're driving by, that Longview stands out, that we're a distinct community, and that we stand out. So let me go through some of the recommendations, and there is a 225-page document that is online tonight, and so you are welcome to sift through that. I will invite you to look through that. I couldn't possibly cover all the recommendations tonight, or I would bore you all to sleep. So I'm just going to hit a few of the high points of what has come out within the recommendations. So number one, we crafted a vision, and this is very important in looking to the future of what our vision is. And so I won't read all this for you. You could probably read it up there. But each one of these key phrases that you'll see within this vision statement is what we built all of our goals and objectives on. So we did a vision statement, then we did goals, then we did objectives, and then we did strategies. And the strategies are those action items, kind of our to-do list. And again, it's a 20-year to-do list, and I'm sure it will change over time, but it hits all the high points of what we're trying to achieve within this vision. So each one of those components: premier community, promoting education, providing business opportunities, each one of those words were things that we built off of. So these are our goals. You can look up there and see what some of those goals are. for, again, each one of those segments of the vision plan of education, providing business opportunities, being culturally diverse and embracing our diversity. Longview's a city that is kind of been built over time, and so embracing that. Building on your heritage. You've got a lot of unique history here, and so building off of that. You've got a lot of natural beauty, building off of that. The focusing on families and healthy living. And then creating a safe, welcoming environment that is attractive to people that we can all call home. So again, each one of these, and these are going to be at our stations in the back so that you can read more about those in more detail. The next thing we did was your existing land use, and this is taking the entire city within the city limits and looking at how is that land currently used. Each one of these colors represents something different, so we analyze that to see where you stand today. Then we came up with your future land use map, and I know you can't possibly read this on the screen from where you are, but we do have maps with more detail that you'll be able to see. But we came up with our future land use. If we could wave the magic wand and look at what do we want our city to look like in the future and put the land uses on there, then that's what that is. So what you see in yellow is residential. You see purple areas that are industrial. Your red and is retail and so on. So again, you can see how this plays out in terms of the big future of what we can do within our ETJ. One of the key concepts that we heard a lot of in our public meetings and the input was that Longview has been built over time as a series of of commercial corridors where retail has gone along those corridors. You have very linear commercial corridors. If you think of all your corridors with your retail and your restaurants and so on, they're very linear. They're up Moberly, or they're down 80, or now they're around the loop. They've spread out, and it's very typical of cities. What we're starting to see a real push on is creating nodes of development where you don't have such a linear corridor, but you're really focusing your activity within a walkable node of activity. And that's one of the things that we heard a lot. You don't really have that. And so that's one of the things that we heard we want to create are those nodes of activity. The bigger thing was downtown. You have a fantastic downtown. There is history. You've already made a lot of improvements to downtown. You're doing a lot there. Downtown is the heart of our city, and anytime people usually resonate with the city, most often they think of what downtown is. And you've got a tremendous opportunity to build and continue on with downtown, and we see that as a big focus area within this plan. Number 2 is mixed-use centers, and this kind of goes hand in hand with the idea of creating nodes, again, of creating walkable, vibrant centers rather than just uses spread all along your corridor, but creating those mixed-use centers. LeTourneau, you have a huge asset in LeTourneau and in your higher ed campuses, and building off of that. Again, you've got creative talent that is here, and so being able to capture them and create places for people to come so that when they come to Longview, where's that one place that you want to tell everybody to go? Where's that one key place that you're like, if you're going to Longview, you've got to see this? And we think downtown is a real key aspect of that. The other part of the plan incorporated your Thoroughfare Plan. We updated the cross sections. We worked very closely with the MPO to make sure that the transportation plan that we created matched what the Greater Metropolitan Planning Organization was doing. So we tied in all those roadway. We heard a lot about east-west connectivity, particularly up in the north, creating some new opportunities for corridors in the south. So we looked at all of that within the transportation plan. We also looked in the broader range of outside the city limits If we ever grow outside the city limits, or even if we don't, just being able to make sure that we have roadways, that we have networks that go through. The worst mistakes that we can sometimes make is not having that plan and then somebody coming and building something right in the middle of where we want a roadway to go through. And then there's limited connectivity and it stunts growth for the future. So that's an important component within the plan. Another thing that we heard a lot of is sidewalks and mobility. Longview is built very well for the car. You have really good roadways for cars. You really do. And again, comparatively to other cities, you've done a really good job on most of your roads. Now we know that there's some that need to go through and there's some that need better maintenance and so on. But for the most part, you've done a real good job on your roads. What you haven't done a good job of is sidewalks and mobility for additional access. It's very hard to ride a bike. You don't have good sidewalks on many of your streets. And so we realize that this is a real important component. Again, looking to your future, not only tying your schools together so that neighborhoods can walk, but just also for connectivity and health and well-being. To that end, we have some what we call complete streets, and these are just streets that look at all modes of transportation between the pedestrian and the bike. A few that we particularly highlighted were those coming off of 20, the Estes, what we kind of call the wishbone, the Estes, and where Moberly and High and Green and all those streets coming together. Being able to get people from 20 and to downtown is really important. And yes, can they drive there now? But is it the most beautiful corridor that you've ever driven on? I think your public has said no. And there's a lot of improvements that we can do to make that connection into downtown and make those streets more inviting. Interstate I-20 is a really important corridor. It is your front door. And what's on that road when people are just coming through, since most of your traffic is coming from 20, they're seeing what you see on I-20. And again, one of the things that we heard quite a bit was we need some improvement on I-20. We need to do a better job of the development around there so that we have a better front door to visitors, that we're taking advantage, that we're looking at how the gateways are treated and what the land uses are and what we can do along that. And I know your EDC has recently acquired some dilapidated land and torn that down, and it's actually a really good thing because it lays the groundwork for future development to come in on those key corridors. And so we recommend continuing that. Again, if you can imagine looking like this, and you can see all kinds of cities and examples across the country where they've created more of a gateway image and created something that's more aesthetically pleasing, not only to your citizens, but to those coming. And so we think that there's real opportunity, particularly off the 20 corridor, to build off of what you've already started doing. Maintenance and aesthetics was another key thing that we heard a lot of. You do not have a property maintenance code. And so a lot of times we heard the words code enforcement, but there's not a whole lot to enforce when it comes to maintaining. And so this is a really important thing going forward. There was a lot of comments that we heard about aesthetics. It's just not as inviting as we would like it to be, and there's some streetscape elements or some landscaping elements. There's some cleaning up of some of our major corridors and dilapidated buildings that we could do. So that's a key thing that we recommend within this plan, is to look at that in the future and see if that is something that you want to do. In essence, we want our streets to be safe. We want them to be inviting. We want them to be well connected to our neighborhoods. You have some really good neighborhoods, and we would like to show that. And if I could make one observation in working on the plan, you have a lot of really good things, but many of them are hidden. If you're just coming to Longview and you want to see that one great thing, then you can't always see that. And so it's turning that inside out, taking those things that are great and making them more visible, and those things that aren't so great, and fixing those is really one of the key threads. Another big thing is parkland. As a whole, you are woefully short on parkland. You have about 651 acres of parkland right now, and there's some formula that we typically look at for number of people to parkland. And you're pretty short on what that is. If you were to apply some pretty conservative numbers to that, you almost should have double the parkland of what you have right now. And then you add in the future growth, and you can see the numbers. It gets up to the 1,400 acres of parkland. We know we don't have the money. You talk about an ATM machine. You would absolutely need that to be able to fix and buy all the parkland that is needed, so we've looked at prioritizing that. This map just shows where you currently have parks and where there's a void, and the blue area, if you can see in these blue areas, that's where you're void of parkland. And you can imagine that much of that is growing north because you're growing north, but you haven't acquired the land to be able to do parks there. So that was a key initiative. Another one is just improving your existing parks. There's some parks that you currently have that need improvement, that need some attention, and the ability to be able to maintain that. If there was one key thing besides the aesthetic thing that I mentioned earlier that many of your citizens would like to see is more trails. You've done a really good job with the Borman Trail. People love that. We love to see more of that. We'd love to see more of our neighborhoods better connected. So we have a whole trail map of how we can extend those trails. In fact, you've already done a trail map. Much of that is just implementation of that your Parks Department is currently working on. So in summary, just some of the key points for parks is, number one, increasing just the number of the acreage of parkland, and much of that needs to happen in the north. The improvements of parks in some of your older parks, particularly some of the ones in the south. You've got several master plans right now that you've already done, you've already spent the time on, and so the implementation of that for Lear Park, for Spring Hill Park, the Arboretum was another one that people would like to see finished within Longview. And you can kind of see this is really ranked from 1 to 8, so I won't read all these, but you can kind of see what some of those key items are that came out as parks. I mentioned the land use earlier, so let me explain something to you. So the city limit boundary, again, you can't see it as well on this map, but all of this area around this bubble is what's considered in your ETJ, your extraterritorial jurisdiction. Part of our job when we're doing any kind of a land use plan, we have to look at the whole bubble, not just with what within the city limits, but that outside area. You'll notice on one thing about this land use is that most of this that is shown outside of the bubble that is outside the city limits is pretty much residential. We're showing most of that residential, and there's a key reason for that, and that is because you do have a good number of vacant buildings and underutilized area within what we consider the core, within the loop and around that downtown area. And so the real objective here is let's fill in what we have before we keep expanding out. So we're not necessarily recommending that we take on much of that. I'll take an amen. I'll always take an amen. So we're recommending let's fill in that core because we do have a good number of buildings and land and opportunities within. So that's a key thing that I want everybody to understand, that's really what we're looking at. However, one of the things that we do have to look at in the future when we are looking out to our ETJ is what are those particular properties that may make sense to come underneath the city. It is by the government code and by the laws of Texas, cities are allowed to annex a certain amount. It's based on a formula of what that is. Your particular formula, you would be allowed to annex up to 10,000, a little over 10,000 acres. We are not recommending that. It is a possibility, and it is certainly the right of the city to do that. We're not necessarily recommending that. What we are recommending is there are some lands along key corridors and key areas that we do think that you need to be able to allow land for new business to come in. For example, one of the things that we talk about in the economic development chapter is being able to land the next big thing. What's the next big Eastman or the next big industry that wants to come in here, and where would they go? And being able to allow that land and being able to have some availability for that. Along the loop, there are probably some key frontages along the loop that would be important to be able to look at. This is a very long-range plan, and this will not happen without a lot of other meetings that would take place. So I don't want anybody to be nervous about this particular part. Anytime we talk annexation or growth management, that's always sometimes a concerning factor for people. But it is something that is being our due diligence within the plan we have to look at. And we have to look at what that is and what areas might make sense to come underneath the city. And I do think you probably have some areas just right along the roadway, again, perhaps down here along the loop in I-20, and being able to increase your frontage along I-20 was something that we heard was very important. So all of this area in here is not what we're recommending. That's what you're able to annex, but it is not what we're recommending. And so you can see again in the plan where those recommended areas are for long-term future. The other thing is just fire and police. Again, as we grow, making sure that we have those adequate fire stations and police stations and that we're able to adequately service those areas. And so there are some recommendations in the plan for some new fire stations to be able to meet that need, and also police and consolidating. They're really crammed. We got a tour of their building right now, and so being able to expand and meet those future needs. Also, the Fire and Police Training Center. Have any of y'all been out there? It is, I've worked on a few fire and police training centers, and it is woefully outdated, and it's in the middle of a neighborhood. So we talk about knitting neighborhoods together. It's a use that probably needs to be moved out of that neighborhood for long-term uses. And other public facilities are just how some of your departments are fairly spread out, and some of them are there's not, like Parks Department, for example, there's some needs that consolidating some of those departments, making it more efficient to be able to work together, and just an overall space need for facilities. So let me pause for a minute. Those are some of the big ideas that are in there, but let me tell you a little bit more of what each chapter is, because I would love for you all to go and look at this and study it more. But the overall plan, there's 10 chapters in it, so I'm going to quickly run through what's in each one of those chapters. So if you at home want to go take a look at this, you'll know, what you might be interested in and what you want to look at. So chapter number one is a community snapshot. It looks at our demographics. It looks at kind of where we stand today and what our population growth and what we're planning for. You're at about 82,000 now, and we're looking at, within a 10-year time frame of increasing up to 92,000. So those are numbers that we look at and that we study as we're thinking about this. Number two is what we call the long view. That is the vision. That is what we're looking at in the future, and it's got all those vision, goals, and objectives that are in that chapter. Number three is our future land use map, and that's what shows those percentages of all the future land use and how that breaks down. Number four is our transportation and circulation section, and that's what talks about our future roadways and classification of those roadways, and the complete streets and the sidewalks and bike lanes and those types of things that I covered. Number five is our public facilities, and that looks at all of your city facilities as a whole and where those future needs are. Number six is our parks, recreation, and open space, and so a lot of attention has been given in the Parks and Rec Plan that would be able to apply for Texas Parks and Wildlife grants. And then number seven is neighborhood and community livability. And those are those kind of sometimes intangible things of what makes our city, what makes us want to live here and want to be here, and all the social health and well-being and aesthetics and all of those things are what's going to be in chapter 7. And then number 8 is our growth management strategy. And then number 9 is our economic development summary. And one note I will make is Economic Development, LEDCO, recently did a strategic plan. It's a really good strategic plan, so much of this chapter references that, but it makes sure that we're tying that plan together with the comprehensive plan. And along those lines, all of the plans, we have a reference to the police strategic plan, the fire strategic plan, the parks plan, EDC's plan, all of the plans that have been done really, again, come and they're knitted together in that puzzle that we talked about within this. And then number 10, which is not in there yet, and part of that is because we wanted to hear your feedback on here, what you think is important, but number 10 is our implementation matrix, and that's what's going to pull all the different strategies together, put them all in a list so that we can define what's short-term, what's mid-term, what's long-term, what might be some of the funding mechanisms that we look at going for, and that's what City Council will work on for future projects. They'll still go through their own CIP list to break down year by year what specifically will be done, but this will give the overall big picture of what we propose within the plan. So here's our next steps, and here's how you can be a part of what we're doing. Number one, Keith mentioned this earlier, this entire plan is now posted on the website. If you go to the City of Longview's website and you look anywhere on that for that Longview logo that you keep seeing, it's this one up here in the top right. It should be on the home page, but if you don't see it, look for that logo. If you click on that, that will take you to a site that has got the meetings that we've had, it's got the things that we've done, kind of summary of what we've done. It's got the plan where you can download it. It also has all of these other appendices I just referred to that you can download. And then there is a comment section where you can provide your comment. So if you have a particular detailed comment or something very general, then you're able to give that on the website. So all of those appendices I mentioned will be included on that. We will also have hard copies at the library, so if you'd rather actually use pen and paper, then you are welcome to do that and provide us feedback based on that. We also have some comment cards at the back. So Keith mentioned just our overall schedule. Just to let you know, we are looking at getting all of our comments by December 15th. That's over the next month and a half. Then we'll be not only taking public comment, there'll also probably be some follow-on presentations of this. We may go to some various boards and commissions. City staff will be taking this around. If you have a particular board or commission or neighborhood group or church or Rotary or anything that you want to do, we'll be happy to give you the tools so that you can take this plan. The mayor mentioned this at the very beginning. We want this to be a community plan, so we want to put it out there as much as we possibly can for you to be able to give your feedback, because at the end of the day, number one, we want you to support this. Number two, we want you to know what the plan is for the future. We want you to be excited about it, and we want to make sure that we're incorporating what you feel is important as we make those decisions. So by December 15th, give us your feedback. Then we will be going to P&Z in January, Planning and Zoning in January, and then we plan to take this to the City Council in February for adoption. Those dates are both tentative right now, but that's our plan, is to go in January and February to get it adopted by then. And if you're a tweeter, and we've got a lot of information, as we mentioned earlier, the newspaper's done a phenomenal job of posting a lot of the articles and a lot of information. But if you're a social media person, then look us up on Facebook. Go to this hashtag for Longview Texas Plan and be able to give your comments on that if you would desire to do that. And from the bottom of my heart, I want to tell you all how much I appreciate you taking the time to be here. I appreciate the committee and those that have worked so hard throughout this plan and given us feedback and helping us and getting the word out there. We sincerely appreciate all of your time and attention.